So what is the truth behind Itosu and Funakoshi's legacy? Now, if you don't know who they are the grandfather and father of modern karate. Back in Itosu's time, very few people practiced karate. It was only on some small islands just off the coast, well, not just off the coast, but south of Japan, Okinawa, and it was only practiced by a handful of instructors, and there were very few students indeed. In fact, Funakoshi said of Itosu's classes that they were quite small, and one of Funakoshi's other instructors only had one student, and that was Funakoshi. So karate wasn't a big affair. There was very few people practicing it indeed. Now, in the very late 1800s, two Okinawan karate practitioners enlisted in the Japanese army. The Japanese were so impressed by their physicality and their fitness that they sent a researcher to Okinawa to find out more about karate. Now, what the researcher reported back was that karate was too disorganized, it was too unstructured, it was too difficult to learn, and took too long to learn, and therefore it couldn't be adopted into one of the Army's training programs. Now, I don't know Itosu's exact involvement and relationship with that researcher, but he seemed to at the same time be very moved to motivate, very motivated, to address the issues that brought up, and he also had a second goal of introducing karate into schools because he believed karate would really help school children, and he was right. So the net result of his efforts developed three things really developed, and they revolutionized and changed karate. The first was he set about standardizing all of the karate techniques and putting them into a set system of fundamentals and basics that we know today. Now, there are lots of great things about that. That has allows people to learn and pick up karate very quickly. The set stances allow people to develop up a sense of self-movement, a sense of body mechanics and movement as they learn to transition from traditional stance to traditional stance, and they develop up power and effectiveness through getting their whole body to move through with a technique. Now, you could argue about some of those basics from here aren't exactly practical. Some of the set stances are an oversimplification, but in general, the concept is a good concept that has allowed karate to become one of the world's most popular martial arts today. Second thing he did was when he was deciding to teach school kids, he decided that the kata and the self-defense included in the kata was far too brutal and violent and dangerous for school children. So what he proceeded to do was he proceeded to take all of the grappling, all of the dirty fighting, all of these super effective techniques and stylize them into basic techniques. It's one of the reasons why Uchi-Uke block, even though you never practice it in sparring, even though you never see professional fighters ever use any technique that's close to Uchi-Uke in fighting, from here it appears loads in our katas because it's not actually a block, it's representative of a whole bunch of different self-defense techniques, grabs, grapples, neck manipulations, arm joint locks, 12 to 6 elbows, a whole swathe of techniques, outwards blocks for swinging punches, all sorts of things that were just uniformized into Uchi-Uke. So when you look at a kata and you see loads of Uchi-Ukes, the chances are it wasn't actually meant for a straight punch at all, even though a lot of Japanese karate styles still interpret them as blocks. So moving on swiftly from here, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but the third thing he did was he said a very innocuous statement, but actually it had big ramifications. He said, you need to decide whether you're doing your kata for self-defense or for fitness reasons or for health reasons, was his words. So basically that fairly innocuous statement, he was promoting karate, I believe, at the time to schools, saying, look, it's not all. He's trying to prove, well, look, it's not all violent. It's good for fitness. It's good for discipline. It's good for those things. But basically, he was making a paradigm shift in the purpose of training, and basically, through those three things, through the standardization of techniques, through the dumbing down of karate kata, and essentially what Ian Abernathy says is children's karate from here on, and stylizing all of the highly effective and diverse techniques in karate into just a series of blocks and punches. And also changing the purpose. By the way, changes don't get bigger than changing the purpose of something from here. When you change the purpose from the major focus or function of a whole art from self-defense to as a means of keeping fit and a means of teaching self-discipline, etc., then the whole structure of everything else changes to fit that purpose. So he made some very, very sweeping changes. Moving on to Funakoshi. Funakoshi, and by the way, Itosu was very, very successful. He introduced it in schools, and karate became a lot more popular in his time. And Funakoshi took that a step further and introduced karate to Japan. And later on, from here, his legacy was when he. First of all, US servicemen occupying Japan took karate back to the States, and also to Funakoshi sent emissaries out, people like Inoida, he sent to London to spearhead the growth of karate in England, and there were loads of other people he sent all over the world, and from here, and that helped karate become a worldwide phenomenon. But going back to where he started from, in 1922, Funakoshi moved to Japan to spearhead the growth of karate. When he arrived in Japan, he found the Japanese had very, very specific tastes and wanted very, very specific things about karate. For example, Funakoshi envisaged that karate would have a set of 9 throws and takedowns. Because karate not just evolved as a striking art, karate evolved not just from white crane kung fu, but also from native Okinawan wrestling. They understood, the founders of karate understood the importance of grappling. Grappling and throws and takedowns, and even arguably rudimentary ground fighting, are contained in the katas, and certainly Okinawan wrestling was a definite part of karate. But when they took it to Japan, from here, the Japanese said, we already have Judo, which was Jiu-jitsu at the time, but we already have Judo, and we don't want to learn your throws and all that kind of stuff. If we want to learn that, we'll go to a Judo school. We're interested in the strikes and the kicks because we don't have anything like that. That is new and exciting. And Funakoshi, for one reason or another, probably because of that pressure, drop the throws relatively quickly from here. Likewise, there are loads of other small things and some big things in karate which changed to fit the tastes of the Japanese. For example, the karate gi even from here is a lighter weight judo gi, because that's what the Japanese were used to wearing when they did a martial art. Before that, everyone just did karate in their normal clothes. Also too, from here, Shotokan in particular likes to practice a lot of step sparring drills where they come through with a lunging punch with their hips square, and that is an affectation of Aido. From here, if you study Japanese sword, what happens is you have a very, very formalized set of techniques because you're using a very dangerous weapon and training with a dangerous weapon. And what you would do is you would always drill to attack your opponent stepping forwards, so your slash would be away from your forward foot so you don't cut your foot off. And that step and that lunging technique is a nod to Aido, because the Japanese were familiar with Aido and they wanted to see something that was familiar to them and something that was easy to learn because they'd done something similar to it in the past. And that is why Shotokan practitioners still practice doing lunge punches as an attack today, even though no one in real life ever attacks you with a lunge punch. Certainly from a big step back then a big step forwards. No one ever does that from here. It's a completely crazy and impractical technique because you're learning how to defend yourself against something that no one will ever use. So that makes a lot of sense, and it's practiced these days because Japanese about a century ago wanted things to feel familiar to them. That's a really, really, yeah, it's really relevant today. Okay, so you'll see stories like that consistently in karate's early history through Japan. From here, Funakoshi changed loads of things, but even Funakoshi himself wanted to put the brakes on the amount of change that was happening. For example, from here, in his later years, his students started up a organization called the Japanese Karate Association, the JK. It's still around today, and one of his students, Nakayama, from here, wanted to make loads and loads of changes. Funakoshi was the figurehead of that organization, but Funakoshi himself retired from the JK because he couldn't stand to see how much karate was moving away from its self-defense roots and how stylized it had become. And also, too, Funakoshi's sons didn't start to practice sport karate until 1959, 2 years after Funakoshi's death, because Funakoshi was so against karate becoming a sport. So, long and the short of it, from here, karate 120 odd years ago was extremely self-defense based. It was its primary purpose, and Itosu and Funakoshi from here changed karate radically, dumbing down the kata from here and over stylizing and over narrowing it, and turning it from a very holistic art, which included throws and grapples and dirty fighting, into a very, very stylized art. And then their students went on to continue to evolve karate towards more abstract and more sport-orientated drills. They started to train in kata, not for its self-defense, but for just as an art form and a means of keeping fit, and from here practicing a sense of self-mastery, and so many things were lost in karate. So you could argue from here two ways about Funakoshi and Itosu's legacy. Now, the first thing you could argue is oh my God, they completely changed karate, and from here they turned it into a quite abstract, and the net result of their changes has meant that people now say, both laymen and other martial arts now criticize karate as karate doesn't work. And we've become specialists in long-range fighting, even though we once were very, very holistic, and I could go on and on and on. So there are loads of people that would lament about the changes that Funakoshi and Itosu made to karate. However, there are others that would hail Funakoshi and Itosu as heroes because they made karate popular. And that's the most important thing to understand about their legacy. Karate was a small, tiny art practiced on some islands way off the coast of Japan. And it was an unknown art, basically. And through their efforts, they turned karate into a worldwide phenomenon and the world's biggest martial art. And the most important thing to understand is that was their goal. Well, maybe not worldwide, but certainly Itosu wanted to make it a lot more popular, and Funakoshi wanted to bring it to Japan, and eventually later on in his life he did want it to become a worldwide phenomenon. So their goal was never to make karate better. Itosu didn't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to make changes in karate to make karate a more effective martial art. Funakoshi didn't wake up, didn't say, oh yeah, I'm going to drop all the throws so karate will become more holistic, or karate will become better if we specialize in long-range fighting. That wasn't their goal at all. They were compromises, massive compromises that they made, knowingly made. From here, Funakoshi never returned back to Okinawa, probably because, well, it's argued because that he was afraid of the criticism he would take from other masters that saw the changes he made as going way, way too far and changing the purpose of karate and ruining karate, which you could still argue today. So, long and the short of it, from here, Funakoshi and Itosu made all of their decisions based on their goal and their intent to make karate popular. and they listened to their audience very, very carefully. Itosu from here listened to the schools, and from here he dumbed down karate accordingly to make it to get karate into the schools. And unfortunately, of course, the children's karate that Itosu created had eventually became all the karate that we know. And I could go on about that, but again, Funakoshi was had his finger on the pulse when it came to the Japanese. He appeased them in so many ways, including dropping the throws, all sorts of different things from here to make karate more familiar to the Japanese and to make it more appealing to the Japanese. But the changes they made did not make karate a better self-defense, even though before they got hold of it, from here, karate's purpose was always to learn self-defense. And in fairness, Itosu did envisage that one day he would teach children's karate, and then he would teach higher grades and adults from here the real stuff. But somewhere along the line, the children's karate became all that was left. And Funakoshi himself, as I said earlier, wanted to put the brakes on the changes, but from here it was too late and out of his hands by that time. So, what do we learn from Itosu and Funakoshi's legacy? And what we need to learn is not what they did, and we don't want to, as this is my favourite quote ever, is do not follow in the footsteps of the masters. Rather, seek what they sought. So, if we look at Funakoshi and Itosu in that light, they were prepared to do anything and everything. They were prepared to radically change the art that they loved in order to make it popular and in order to make it relevant for the audience that they had at the time. These days, from here, we are panned by, as I said, by laymen and other martial arts alike because we are not effective in most self-defense situations. Straight punches and long-range kicks are great for long-range fighting, but unfortunately most self-defense situations start a lot closer than that, usually under an arm's length away. So, bearing all of that in mind, if Itosu and Funakoshi were around today, knowing that from here, laymen, our audience, and our peers all want karate to return. All want karate to be criticizing. Some people are criticizing karate for not being self-defense based, and others just simply want karate to become self-defense based. And the yardstick that we're measuring karate against is self-defense. If they're around today, they would do exactly what they did back in their day. They would make radical changes and do whatever it takes to make karate popular and relevant again today. And in our case, that means returning karate back to our self-defense roots and making sure that what we teach is practical and effective and realistic and, of course, holistic. Now I could harp on and on about that, but I hope you found that very, very inspirational and insightful as to what Itosu and Funakoshi's true intent and true purpose behind all the changes they made are. From here, they were never about preserving karate, they were always about evolving it to be relevant for the people they were addressing at the time, and we should take a leaf out of their book if we want to honour them and change karate towards the practical and effective, which is what our students demand right now. Take care, train hard, train smart, think common sense.